Hey there, I'm Kevin.
And I'm Chris.
This is a little bit of a different intro. This is episode 329 that was recorded live at Folk Alliance International in Kansas City, the 2023 version.
What a great week. It was a great conference. We made a lot of music. It was fun. And pertinent to this, we had a great live episode of the podcast.
Yeah, it's always great recording in front of all our listeners that are there. Awesome time. Chris, I'm ready to roll. How about you? Why don't you give us some intro music?
You're listening
to the CD Baby.
CD Baby.
CD Baby.
DIY
Musician
Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to a live taping of the DIY Musician Podcast, live from Folk Alliance 2020. Wait, what year is this? 2023 in Kansas City. Super excited to be here. It's one of my favorite conferences. How are you all doing? Christina?
I'm great. I'm contractually obligated to say that this is my second favorite conference because CD Baby hosts one, but it might be tied. I love Folk Alliance.
How are you, Christina?
Feeling great.
Feeling great. Got so much sleep. You actually did get a lot of sleep.
I've actually gotten the most sleep out of everyone on this trip.
Oh, I'll sleep. We'll sleep later when we get back home. But so excited to be here with all of you today. We're going to be talking about releasing music in 2023, but we did an episode of the podcast about that topic more broadly a couple weeks ago. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about that was sort of a offshoot of that was around more of the strategic opportunities for releasing music and how things have changed so much, even in the last couple of years with the platforms, with social networks. And one of the things that we were sort of keying off of is that a lot of artists are sort of just releasing music, but not really sure what their goals and objectives are. And so we boiled it down to two, that oftentimes artists, sort of this conflict, do they want to get paid or do they want to be famous? And oftentimes those things are in direct conflict with like being popular on streaming platforms compared to actually being able to pay your bills. And we're going to dive into some of that. But first, we have a list of all the different types of artists that and personas that artists might be taking on in 2023 compared to maybe just a few years back where most people were sort of approaching the market pretty similarly.
Yeah, I can run through them. And to begin this list, I just want to say there's no like correct way to release music, but I think there is probably a correct way for each individual artist based on their goals, based on their temperament, what they're willing to do, what they want. And so these are sort of the kind of caricatures, I suppose, that I thought of all the types of people I see releasing music through CD Baby. One is the TikToker, which is someone who thinks of social first. Music, the way they share music, it's almost like market testing, and they're doing it in real time. Sometimes the song's not even finished. It might just be 15 seconds, but they very much think of themselves as a creator first. Then in contrast to that, there's sort of like the traditionalist, which I don't mean about traditional music. It's just more that traditional mindset of like, I disappear, I make a record, I put it out, I tour it, I promote it for a year or two, repeat. It's kind of the old model, which still can work if you do it well. Then there's the YouTuber, the person who they might be a video game music maker or a cover song artist or something, but they kind of think of themselves as a little TV network. Very different habits for that type of creator. There's a type of person who really like wants to lean into the analog world, and they like just do house concerts and sell vinyl, and they really don't care all that much about streaming, or maybe they care about it, but to go into what we're going to talk about later, it doesn't really pay the bills. What pays the bills is the very analog, in real life kind of stuff. There's the digital only artist. We see a ton of these obviously now at CD Baby. They tend to be very prolific. They do digital only releases. They put out music all the time. There are sync licensing people, composers, sometimes they're songwriters who think about their life as like, I sit in my basement all day and I record things for TV shows or for commercials, and it pays a lot, and I'm pretty convinced that all of these people eventually regret it and say, I want to play a show, but I forgot how to perform live. But good for paying the bills. What else do we have? There's the futurist, and this is the type of person who the story of their music making is wrapped up in the medium, and they're always experimenting. Like maybe 15 years ago, it might have been the first artist on Patreon or something, or Kickstarter, and now it's the person who's like on the frontiers of the NFT world and stuff. And so their audiences tend to be people who are in those worlds, and the community they build is partially about the music, but also partially about how they're releasing it. Just a couple more. There's a collaborator. This is like an artist who really thinks about doing a lot of one-off guest features, collaborations. Maybe they get around to putting out an album, but the first thing they want to do is just work with a bunch of different people and see what happens. And then there's the hobbyist, who just puts out music whenever the heck they can get around to doing it. They're not taking the act of promoting their music very seriously. They might take creating the music very seriously, but it's a hobby. And I'm sure I missed a bunch, but that was sort of the main avatars of music I could think about.
Christina, which one do you identify with most there?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is, as a traditionalist, I resent that TikTok was on the top of this list. And I'm somewhere between a traditionalist. I really love analog. I'm definitely into the sync licensing world. That is where a lot of money exists. So if you need to pay bills with music, dive into that. And then what was the other? Oh, a collaborator. I love to collab. And I wish that I could not just be. I wish that I had the drive of a hobbyist, in that I wish I didn't stress out about that time in between. I wish that there was that time in between was not full of existential dread about why haven't I put anything out in 3 years.
I think the hobbyist has a whole lot of existential dread
you
too.
Think?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, somewhere in there, I think you guys make a lot of fun of me because of the sort of old-manedness of my I hate the internet, I hate TikTok, NFTs are dumb, that sort of stuff that comes out of my mouth. And while I definitely adapt to the times, definitely come from a world of, playing shows every week and meeting your audience and building a community in person and street teams and putting posters up on flagpoles and like building, really quality product that connects one-on-one with people, that it's really hard sometimes to quantify that in the digital world, or to just like put up a 30-second clip and be like, this is creating connection. That's my
Chris, what was the name of that little like 20-minute documentary we saw about that artist Jake, that I have this love-hate relationship? He's this huge TikToker. It's Jake with a V, because we don't spell things right anymore because we're out of names and letters. But he's one of those that if you watch him on TikTok, it's fascinating to see like his approach is the complete opposite of everything I grew up as an artist doing, where he like writes a chorus, it's on TikTok, it has 10 million views, and then he'll decide, okay, I'll go write a verse for this thing. And then but the documentary was fascinating to watch because he was being invited to play this huge festival, and he literally only had 3 songs.
Oh my God.
But they were all getting millions and millions of streams and viral. Like everyone was using them in tracks. But I think, after it was one of those things where I'm like, this is the worst. What happened to the music industry? But then at the same time, but I also love it because I have a DIY spirit at heart. But the thing that I thought, it was just such a, if you're like, what is this TikTok thing about? Like watching that little documentary. Was that Rolling Stone that put it out? I think it was.
Can't remember.
It's on YouTube. Just search Jake documentary. But it was fascinating to see his approach to marketing music was really about that social interaction, getting that social proof, putting something out there. He even goes to malls a lot and sits in the food court and airdrops tracks to random people that show up on his iPhone.
Wait, how is that different than putting a poster up on a flagpole? Really, it's just a different entrance point.
So yeah, it's funny because there'll be someone like sitting at a table with their headphones on, eating food, and he's got his camera rolling. He's like, I'm going to airdrop them something. And you see the person like, what is this? And they're like looking around, and they listen, like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, don't click on that stuff.
Well, one of the things I find so fascinating about that is I'm sure some of it is staged. I'm sure some of it is like artifice and presentation, but there is an element of it being just a demoing process or almost a collaboration, co-writing process with your audience and getting that kind of real-time feedback as you move through a song. Like it could be about a particular lyric in the song. So I'm not totally cynical about that. I think there's a lot of...
What are yours, though? What are you two?
I didn't want to copy you, but I would say, the traditionalist meets the sync composer meets the collaborator. That's kind of, those have been my 3 areas of where I've dug in.
Yeah, I guess I'd say I'm a traditionalist mixed with a futurist, if such a thing can exist.
You definitely are more of a futurist than either one of us, I think.
What is everyone out there? I mean, not that you can all shout at once and
Shout
we'll
it
know,
all
but
out at once.
how do you identify?
How many of you identify as a traditionalist?
I would assume there'd be a lot at
Yeah,
Folk
it's a folk
Alliance.
festival. That makes a lot of sense.
Any big TikTokers, and you're like, I'm throwing ideas on TikTok
Yeah,
and
we've
see
got
how
We
they
have
land.
one proud TikToker. Nice.
I talk a lot of TikTok shit, but I'll tell you what, it's an amazing platform for a lot of people, so I'm not judging it at all.
But part of the reason why we mentioned this and wanted to lay these out is because through CD Baby, we work with so many artists, and I think one of the big issues that, as far as an artist developing a career and growing their audience, is they haven't really figured this out about themselves, and they're just trying to throw stuff all over the place and not focusing on where their strengths are, where they're making good connections with fans, understanding who they really are as an artist and where they can thrive and what's going to work best for them. And so I think there's a lot of times pressure to be all things to everybody, because you see people exploding on TikTok and like, well, that doesn't really resonate with me, but now I feel like I have to do that. But if you're going to do that poorly, then it's just wasting your time. So as artists, there's so many different ways and career paths and different artist personas these days. Just understanding who you are and what your goals are and where it's best. It's okay for you to say no to things, I think, and oftentimes as artists, we feel this pressure to be everything. And so that was, when we were putting that together, it's like, yeah, there's so many different artist personas. Like, we know so many YouTubers that never play shows, barely ever play with other people. They just do these videos in their rooms and have massive audiences, and that's their music expression and their career, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think in the next section, we want to ask you your opinion on this as well, but kind of jumping off on what you're saying is, we only have so much time, so if you can set a priority goal, it sort of shapes the way you go about achieving it with your limited hours, limited resources. And so we're going to make sort of a list of things you could do in either category of these goals. But basically the question is, what's more important to you at this point in your growth, career, however you want to frame it? Getting paid or getting noticed on some really sort of larger scale? And so, should we do a little hand raising for?
Yeah. So this, again, we haven't really fully gone into it, but if you identify as somebody who's like, I need to be famous, raise your hand. And it's okay,
Christina,
no
you
judgment.
can raise your hand for this one.
Hey, my
I
priorities
feel
have
like no
changed
one's
a
going to
little bit.
raise their hand when you frame it that way. How about what you need right now is massive attention for your music?
Yeah.
Can we frame it that way?
I didn't mean it in any other way than that. You want to build a big ass audience. Yes. Okay,
Oh,
there we
there,
go. Sorry, sometimes the way I talk sounds cynical. Or you just want to make hella money. Okay. Or how
or
about
pay
both?
the bills.
Or pay the bills.
How about we want to pay the bills and we don't want to have to decide between our art and paying the bills? No, they're not the
No.
only two choices. Those are just the ones we're talking
just
about
keeping
right
it
now.
simple for the conversation and for the big make the point with the contrast of the two. Part of the reason why we mentioned that is because so many artists will hear all the time about why doesn't streaming pay more? Why? And yes, there's lots of work that needs to be done with the models around streaming, and there's some good discussion happening in that space that's I think will take shape even more this coming year. But oftentimes as artists, we're like, I need to make money from my music, but then we send all our fans to the place where we make the least amount of money, as opposed to thinking about that more strategically. If building revenue streams is more important, then you don't have to drive everybody to the place where you're going to make the least amount of money. Think about that more strategically. Or the opposite, if what your goals are, you're going to need that to get noticed on a larger scale, then maybe that effort is more important to have good streaming numbers. But if just understanding that those two things, it's not necessarily an either or, but it doesn't mean that you have to spend all your energy just driving people to streaming platforms, because I think that's one of the amazing things about being at CD Baby, that we've seen thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of artists release music, and we've seen artists make full-time living doing so many things that were outside of what were industry norms, that was still all about their music. and it was just a matter of them prioritizing what they really needed and wanted. For some artists, it might be where you're in a place where getting that exposure on streaming platforms is going to help you get better gigs, get you off the ground more. It might be in that development stage where just that audience building and discovery mode is really important. So that might be the case, but really just having those things in mind.
And even if you're at the hobby level where this is your passion, I mean, it still costs money, right? It costs money to go into the studio. It costs money to drive across town even just to play a gig. So sometimes there's just a way to even recoup that, because this is a business, whether it's a passion, whether it is a full-time business. Like you don't want to lose money on this. So how can we generate it back is how I like to think about it. Yeah. Try to stay out of the red if you can.
When you're talking about some of the successes we've seen about people who really effectively monetize a small following, you said they kind of went outside of expectations, but I just wanted to clarify that also means they intentionally stopped or never went about trying to seek the kind of like metrics and getting the trophies that the quote music industry cares about. So like something like, oh, I'm stressing because I only have 200 monthly listeners on Spotify. This type of artist who's like, more than paying the bills, they don't give a damn. Their fans are not on Spotify, or at least, like you said, they're not trying to make anything happen there.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's, especially I think with this audience, I'm assuming that a large portion of you are playing shows. You're in front of real people that would buy physical goods or maybe throw lots of money in the tip jar or do things that don't show up on Spotify but actually keep your business afloat, and really understanding that that's okay. That focus and that energy is good, and that those metrics that tend to get talked about a lot of times can be this stressor for artists that they feel like they need to do. But it's like, if you're satisfied in growing your audience and growing your career, it can be whatever you want it to be, and not having this outside pressure to do things on these platforms that get talked about a lot.
Yeah, and so I think for the rest of this conversation, we'll be sort of exploring this dichotomy. There's, on the one side, monetizing a small, loyal fan base, and then on the other, it's massive, algorithmic, often attention and trendiness and stuff. Neither one is correct or incorrect, and they're really not always at odds, but we're just going to try to kind of lean in one direction and then let the pendulum swing. The first section is, if you want to earn money, do these things. And my setup for this is, instead of a real extroverted, hey, pay attention, it's more about coziness and an invitation that feels exclusive and real relational. So
I have an example
who wants to
of
go?
that.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, my friends and I, my husband and I, just started a small little label, and we just make cassette tapes. And we only make a limited amount, and we just did our first release. It was an artist out of North Carolina, Sumner James. He plays in Bombadil, and he wanted to make an ambient release. So we made an ambient tape for him. We did a really small run, and we made more money on that in 1 week than I've ever made in streaming in 10 years. So we hit maybe 25 buyers for this thing. And yet, because people are so into the idea of being part of like a limited community, they're into the idea of supporting the artist directly. We set it up on streaming through CD Baby, but we also did a Bandcamp page where you could pay what you will. And so that creates this community. Now those people will now be notified when the next thing comes out, and hopefully they'll want to be part of this community of people that collect.
Yeah, so I think that plays on like limited scarcity, that whole thing of like they only got this one chance to buy.
Yeah,
and it's
we're not
really,
going to make more.
When you only made 25, it really is like just for them.
We sold out, and we can say that. And maybe it was only 25, but also it's hard to get 25 people to buy cassette tapes. I'm just going to say that. Okay? But it's sort of like what I call analog NFTs.
Yeah.
Analog. You mean just real stuff?
It's just real stuff. But anyway, it does create this community. It creates sort of this idea that we're all part of something together. And when we do live in a digital world, we do live in a place where maybe our fan base is scattered all over the country, and we're not getting to tour there. We're not getting to connect with them in person. At the very least, we can sort of build this collection community and connect in that way and support each other through merch.
So I'll hit the next one. I think one of the things that's important is make a list of just the high dollar generators, the things that you've experienced in your career that I made a lot of money from that, or people bought that, or this really got the fans interested. Because going back to like the thing that we posed, are you looking for exposure and broad attention or make revenue? And we're on the make revenue side. There's so many things that artists skip over that they could absolutely do to monetize their fans, but they just don't offer it. I love Bandzoogle. My band has a Bandzoogle website, and they have commission-free selling of digital goods from the website, and I've sold a digital box set that had all these rarities and unreleased materials from our band, and we charged $70, and people bought it like crazy. And I was like, wow, that was money that they were willing to give. If I hadn't done that, I just left on the table. I also wrapped up our entire catalog as a big digital download and did the same thing. Sheet music, chord charts, all those kind of things that people have a different value set or mindset when they go to buy than how they've come to think about music on the platforms. So I think that's one of those things with artists, that there's a lot of revenue streams that can be very valuable to you, that it's just a matter of trying things. And the thing I love about the digital goods is if nobody buys it, it didn't cost me anything. And so you can try things, and if it works, it's amazing. If not, I spent an hour putting files together and uploading it to the website, big deal. But I think that's one of those things where you get these fans and you're trying to figure out, how do I keep giving them things that will add value to them, but also bring revenue for me as an artist. And just creating a list of those ideas is helpful.
I find that people want to support artists in that way too. If you also frame it as, hey, you have unlimited access to my music for free on these streaming websites, one really easy way for you to support me to keep it going is to just head on over and like buy this either limited edition digital release or a physical item. And that's one way that I think that the customer is then able to conceptualize, well, why am I buying this thing? You know, well, it's because you're really buying it to support the music in general.
And all of that relies on a few basic foundational things that I think we should address, even though it might all sound like review and you all know this, but like, to make an offer means first you have to have a way to communicate with your fans. So the email list, the SMS list, however you're getting that direct contact, it's more important than ever. I know probably every session you go to, people say that, but it really is true, particularly if you're leaning in this direction of trying to make money as opposed to just getting algorithmic reach. So really, really have like a good lead magnet. If you're not familiar with that term, it's just, why should someone give you their email? Like, you got to give them something, and like free download, probably not going to do it. Make something really cool that they can't access any other way unless they give you their contact information.
I'm always really jealous, actually, with both of your ability to come up with leads. Like when you have like a Showco, account or campaign, you're always really good at those catchy leads. I know that you did one, Kevin, with your band that like blew my mind.
The one where we once got kicked off the stage for playing this cover thing. I'll tell you the full story later if you want to hear it. But so I had a live recording of this 70s medley that we did. It wasn't the time we got thrown off the stage, but I said, hear the song that got us kicked off the stage once. And my band was in the Christian market, so everyone was like, what did these Christian boys do on stage that got them kicked out? And so it was an amazing tool to get fans off of Facebook and social, because one of the things that is so important is that, all these platforms, email and SMS, both are still the top way of getting people to convert. People buy from their email. Yes, people buy on social, but not like they do. Email's still the top converting marketing channel. And also, it's one of those things that you should constantly be doing to not only drive revenue, but social platforms come and go. And if you don't own that audience, those platforms own the audience, and it could go away tomorrow and you'd be out of luck. So that's just something that's important, especially for the revenue piece, because when you own that relationship, it's much easier to create an offer for somebody to buy.
Yeah, some of the sort of lead magnet things I've tried, they take a lot of work. So, buyer beware with this. But like for 2 of my albums, I've created these massive behind the scenes experiences that you can only go through if you give me your email. And every day for, 5 to 10 days, you get this just, all these behind the scenes pages on my website that have tons of video content, all sorts of stuff. It's really more content than anyone probably reasonably wants to consume about my music, but
That's awesome.
I feel like I should just put the effort in because that's worth this person's contact.
And then it's like an advent calendar leading up to your release.
Exactly.
For your
That's
for your
exactly
customer.
it. Yeah.
Totally.
It's a secret advent calendar
Yeah.
that it feels like an adventure I can go on with my audience. One other thing I've done is basically sent my... if you give me your email, I'll send you my CD for free if you pay for the shipping. And what ended up happening is then I'd have like an upsell and say, hey, while you're in here, you want a T-shirt or another CD? And more than 50% of the people who took me up on the free CD bought something, so that I actually profited in the end from the gesture of giving something away. But I got a lot of emails that way. One other thing I was going to say about just the foundations is, so we're assuming you have a way to reach your fans. You also have to have a website. Yeah, I know this is basic information, but really use it. Make use of your website. Put a pixel on it so you can retarget people, have a way to capture emails, and use your web store, like Kevin was saying, like actually sell stuff. Make things that are worth buying. Don't be afraid to make the offer. I think artists also are so timid about, I don't want to ask my fans to buy. Well, if you're not asking your fans to buy something, who's going to buy something? Like, your fans are the most likely people. And if your merch and your music is worth having, then it's not an imposition to ask someone to buy it. You're just, giving them a benefit.
Yeah, we probably need to hit through the rest of this list pretty quickly, otherwise we're not going to have time for the other side of the equation. But one other thing I wanted to call out, you were mentioning merch. There are some amazing tools now, like Printful, that does print-on-demand merch, where you can try lots of different merch ideas, and it doesn't cost you anything up front. You don't make as much per sale like if you had 100 T-shirts printed up, but then you don't have 100 T-shirts that you printed up, and you're left with 30 extra smalls that you've got. I mean, we've all come home from playing on the road and have these random T-shirts that will never sell and that eat into the cost. But these tools allow you to drive revenue on some products that probably are more experimental, and you don't know if they'll sell, or you can just keep swapping out designs. What I've loved about it is I've always been so stressed about, I have to choose one design, that's all I can afford, and what if everyone hates that one? I like it, but they hate it, and they like that one. But this allows you to test and then find which ones are resonating, and then go spend the money to have a whole bunch of T-shirts printed. So there's some tools like that I think are helpful at driving revenue, and also just being a little bit more predictive of what's going to be a good seller.
That's how I found out that my audience loves bucket hats.
Really? Interesting.
I put one up on that page on Printful, and I fortunately didn't have to order 500 bucket hats to live in my garage. So it's, buy on demand.
And Printful can be easily integrated with Bandzoogle. It can be easily integrated if you have a Shopify store that you kind of embed on a Squarespace site. It's pretty easy to get this onto your existing website.
You want to hit a couple more real quickly, and then we'll move on?
So I also want to emphasize there can be a digital version of intimacy, like what you experience at a house concert. There is a sort of way to approximate that online through platforms like Twitch and Discord, where you can manage a community in a way that doesn't feel like you're trying to blast it out to everyone like it might if you were on Facebook or YouTube live streaming. So I'd say explore any of those kind of online platforms where it feels like you can be a little cozy family. And then you're all doing what you need to do for networking and professional relationships and friends. You're at Folk Alliance, so that's obviously
you're already pros.
A good thing. I think you said this earlier, but for me, it's really important to remember I can say no to things and guard my time for what is most essential for driving revenue or whatever the goal is. We can't do it all. And also, along with that, is be somewhat guarded about your brand and who you collaborate with and who's in your community and how it communicates, because, again, that's the lifeblood of how you make money. And so don't say yes to every collaboration. Don't necessarily work with artists who don't sound anything like you, unless it's really what your heart desires. But Yeah.
And again, not even for the money making goal. I think that's just general great artist advice. It's okay to say no, or to tell somebody like, I would love to work with you in some capacity, but it's not necessarily aligning with what I'm trying to do right now. That's the nice way of saying it.
All right, now we're going to move into like if reach is your goal, like you're releasing music and reach,
you want to grow your numbers,
like
you want
views, streams, followers. That's your
attendees at your shows.
Yeah. Those are your main goals at this point. If that's it, here's our list of some things to do.
Oh, am I going
and
first?
These aren't like one or the other. We're just trying to highlight that a lot of times artists, again, are spreading themselves thin all over the place, and they're saying, why aren't I making money? Well, you're spending most of your time on activities that inherently will not drive revenue or not drive much revenue. It may drive plays or reach or followers, but and really identifying those things. And then the opposite could be true. You're like, I'm doing all these things, but my streaming numbers aren't growing. And it's like, well, that's because these things don't drive streaming numbers. So if you need that.
Well, yeah, so one thing is go to where the algorithm is good and cheap. And right now that's TikTok. I mean, it's the most amazing content discovery platform probably that's ever been made. It's magical. It's terrifying. If you want massive reach, that's the place to be. It currently is still free or very affordable because they're not at that monetization phase of their company trajectory where they need to start charging you to reach your own audience. But when you're there, either beware of or make use of the lowest common denominator. It might be the stupidest shit that you do that gets massive eyeballs. And if you're very serious about it always wanting to be about your music, don't do that stuff, even if it gets massive attention, or maybe lean into it.
Yeah, you mentioned it's free. I actually have been experimenting with some TikTok ads, just boosting some various posts, and it's actually, you can get a lot of reach even for just a couple bucks. So it's great for free, not having to pay if you understand how it works and understand what kind of content gets legs on that platform. But even with paid advertising, it's quite good and affordable and will help you get a much bigger reach.
And you don't have to have a business profile on TikTok. If you have just a sort of individual user profile, you can do that by it's called promote. Just hit the promote button. They'll charge you some money for credits, and then you can experiment. One other thing I just will say about TikTok is it's true for YouTube as well, but you have to commit to a predictable pace of output and a brand voice. Think of yourself either as a TV network or as like an actual TV show production. Predictable pace. Your new stuff comes out every Wednesday or whatever, and it's always thematic or has a gimmick or a shtick. Like TikTok loves that because they want someone who first discovers you to then go and binge all your stuff. So the more cohesive it feels, the better.
Yeah, I think this is one point where the traditionalist minded, like those artist personas we talked about, can feel like really at odds with someone who's trying to get reach on these platforms, because it is a time commitment. You do have to create a lot of content. You can't just drop a video on TikTok and nothing else and expect anything to happen. You can't do it on YouTube and expect anything to happen. They really want you to create an experience of people are there to see you, your brand, because they like what you're doing. And those two platforms specifically, they really, you look at their artist tools that they have to tell you how to use the platform to your advantage. They will say those very specific things: release on a schedule, be consistent, create really focused content that brings people there because they want to see what you have to do.
Yeah, one thing I know Christine could talk about is like on the Spotify like algorithmic side of things, like you did a lot of pitching of your own music, and I think you probably pitched other artists' stuff too. Like, you want to talk about playlist success in that
absolutely.
regard?
So again, a lot of these things that live in the digital world are algorithmically run, but that doesn't mean that you can only talk to robots. There are a lot of people out there that can help build that algorithmic mountain for you to get to the top. And one of the things that I learned about the Spotify algorithm is that the more playlists that you're on, whether they're Kevin made a playlist and he has 500 followers, and Chris made a playlist and he has 600 followers. Now I have reached to 1,100 followers, right? Because I'm on both of those playlists. So it sort of reads your I don't remember the term for it, but like how many possible viewers or listeners you are now on. So one of the things I learned is that the more you build, even on the smaller playlists, the playlists that are run by real people, you can actually sort of work your way to potentially being heard by those editorial playlists that are selected by algorithms. So the more you use sort of the groundwork of I reach out to people literally directly, sending messages via email, being like, hey, I found that you have this new wave playlist, and because sometimes you can see their names or they'll even put their email addresses in the Spotify bio or something. I saw that you have this new wave playlist. I have a new song, and I think it would be really great on your playlist if you don't mind giving it a listen. And then they do, and then that helps sort of build how many people are listening to you. You're now getting heard by their audience, but then now you're potentially building enough of a snowball effect that you can one day get on a editorial playlist.
Do you want to brag?
And I got one. Yeah. That was
Well, and then another, when you're talking about sort of maximum possible eyeballs or ears, collaboration can work in that same way where, I know what have you done? Featured stuff on?
Yeah, features also absolutely help. So I think everybody here has met artists now that are at various levels, and I bet that there's someone here that you can't wait to collaborate with because they're an incredible artist, but maybe they also have a bigger audience. So if they have a bigger audience, you guys end up working together. Now you're, de facto, is that the word?
Sure.
I have not had enough coffee for this algorithmic talk. But all that to say is now you're, getting their audience. It's just like opening up for somebody at a bigger show. You're going to get a bigger audience because now you're opening up for their song.
And I think there's a sort of a TikTok equivalent with duets and stitches and stuff. You can, and it's real low impact. If you're a fiddle player and you find someone who's done one of those beats and they like say, hey, duet this, just do a 30-second fiddle solo, post it, and suddenly both of your audiences potentially can see one another. Is that the right? Yeah.
And this is all really interpretations, digital interpretations of things that you're probably already doing live. You're probably already playing big collaborative variety shows with a bunch of different artists of different audiences. So now it's thinking about how to do something like that, but digitally. How do I get on a compilation? A compilation will then give you that same sort of reward.
Yeah,
or a playlist, OBS.
I think both of these things are really important to understand that the both social, especially like you were saying with TikTok and the duets and things like that, where you can actually take someone's content and add to it, and then it pushes it out to a bigger audience. But even in the streaming world, this is something that a lot of people, especially if you have that traditionalist mindset of how you engage the market, streaming, every track doesn't have to be precious. So you can do all sorts of collaborations with people that don't have to be the ultimate artistic expression of who you are as an artist. It can just be something you did for fun, and then it gets pushed out to both audiences. I know you've done something that where you ended up getting, how many millions of streams did that one song get?
I think it's like 1.5. Yeah, that was I worked with an electronic kind of 90s dance sort of band. Not my genre at all, but I know them, I like them. So I wrote the lyrics and sang. And of course, the one song that goes, for me, very successful, sounds nothing like my music.
Of course.
And I'm like, when people go and consider if they want to book me or whatever, like, you're not a singer-songwriter. So it's a blessing and a curse, I guess.
But there's ways on the platforms that the way like Spotify and some of the other ones represent music, like if you do a collaboration with an artist, it shows up on their profile as well. So that's why not thinking everything, being so precious about every little release can be an opportunity to reach more people. Or doing variations of your song that can fit in different
a remix is also
playlists. Like one single that my band did, we had the official version, we had a rock version, we had an acoustic version, and then we had a more electronic one that we called Dream Pop version. And the idea was that we could potentially, the song was good in all those forms, and we could target different playlist opportunities based on, there's so many acoustic playlists out there, and the song's good, so why don't we have an acoustic version that we can then pitch to those people? So that's what I mean with like thinking about outside the box. If you're looking to expand your reach and grow an audience, that the way streaming works and social works, there's a lot of opportunities that can expose yourself to a lot more, other people's fans.
I think one thing to emphasize, I said you have to commit to a frequent release schedule. It could be daily, it could be weekly, whatever works for you, but just stick to it. But the other sort of, I think, I imagine this is terrifying for anyone who's actually good on TikTok. I'm not. Is that you have to stick to it way past the point at which you've assumed you failed. Like we talked to Brittany Kellogg.
We're all musicians. We've probably done that.
This is why I'm not interested.
Well, when we interviewed Brittany Kellogg, she said she now has 1 million followers, but she said, I would do a TikTok every day for 90 days. And for most of those 90 days, no one saw or cared about any of what she posted. You know, maybe she'd have dozens or hundreds of views, but it wasn't like massive success. And I could imagine it being very strange to just keep putting things into the void when essentially the feedback you're probably imagining is, I suck, no one likes me. But once she had that one, for whatever reason, magic post that worked, those viewers did go back and watch all her other stuff, and now there is the proof that what she'd done was worth it, but she would have never known if she gave up.
See, to me, it's like a nightmare because it's like playing that show that no one came to, but now it's up there forever. You know?
Or the nightmare show where there's only one person in the audience, and then after they're like, I love that show.
You know, I love that.
I book a house
sure.
concert thing.
That's great, but now there's just like this recorded version of this. I don't know. I'm a traditionalist, y'all.
Yeah.
I think we're going to open this up for questions here in a minute.
We could wrap up real quick with you were talking about playlist pitching. There's a lot of tools you can use to kind of speed that along. There's Groover, Submit Hub, Playlist Push, sort of do some research beforehand and really set some clear expectations for what you want. Results will vary. And what else?
One point on here that I think is important is the social platforms are changing at an incredible speed as far as what works and what doesn't. So if you're actually trying to use these to generate reach, it's pretty important that you keep a finger on the pulse of what's working and what's not. In fact, you mentioned like TikTok still being pre-revenue, even though you can advertise on it. When I see them advertising, all the halftime shows at the college playoffs were brought to you by TikTok. That means they're trying to go mainstream, and these platforms are going to change so fast to try and reach a mainstream audience and just not the Gen Z audience that sort of brought popularity to those platforms. So those things are going to change and morph, and I even have seen a lot about how they are changing them, and same with Instagram. They made it all about the Reels, and their CEO just a couple weeks ago said,
Whoops.
We made a mistake. We made it all about Reels, and the feed doesn't do anything. We're going to change that. And so understanding that what works today may not work next month or 6 months from now, and you kind of have to keep your finger on the pulse of what's working. Otherwise, you can end up just spinning your wheels and feel like, hey, it seems like I'm getting less and less reach from all this effort, and that can actually be a real thing. So that's important if you're trying to use these to drive reach that you know.
I always like to give you a hard time because of the first time we ever talked about TikTok when it first started. I know you hate
what did I
this.
say?
You said, and I quote, "This will never go anywhere." And I said, no.
Do we have video of this conversation?
I have
Because I don't know about it.
Memory of it.
Was
because
I
I remember
sober?
being like, Kevin, we have to build a company TikTok account. This is like a thing the kids are doing. And you're like, no, this won't take off. Nobody's going to use this for music.
I don't know.
That was in 2019, okay?
I'm disputing this comment.
Yeah, it happened. It happened. All right, should we?
I just wanted to conclude with this point because I feel it kind of bridges both of the goals, the monetization and the social reach. Part of the key to social success seems to be, from all the people we talk to that do really well, is setting aside enough time every day to actually talk to people in the comments, which kind of brings it back to a human fan-to-person relationship type of thing. That was particularly true with Brittany Kellogg and Jeremy from Winborn. The comment sections on TikTok and YouTube can be really a vital place for those platforms to see that not only is your content keeping the person around, but you as a person and the way you talk to people is keeping people on the platform, which is obviously what they want to see. So,
also, one thing I'd like to note too. I mean, we've said TikTok a lot in the last 20 minutes, but when it does come to building an audience on a digital realm, if you have if you know where your audience is and they're not on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're on YouTube or whatever, I would say put your energy where you know people are that you're trying to cater to, where you want to be. Like, like we've said, and I've joked a lot about how I hate TikTok, but I have friends and a community on Instagram, so that's where I'll talk to them on the digital market. So don't feel like you have to enter the void of social media madness if it's something that you feel really hesitant about on a specific platform. That's my holistic advice.
Well, in some of the platforms, you might also find that, hey, when I go more direct and call to action, it works over here, but on this platform, that comes off as salesy and not working well, and it I don't know. So I think looking at the platforms, they all have strengths and weaknesses, and whatever your goals are, it might make a difference on where you put your energy. So that's something to think about as well. I will say, as far as if you have a good video that's very hooky that you want to run as an ad, Facebook ads still have massive reach and are great at building an audience for pennies per conversion if you optimize it right. That one is still really great at building audiences that way. But it may not be where you put all your energy creating content, because that is a very different platform than TikTok or Instagram, and the way you create and what you like to do could be different. And the audience you're trying to reach could be very different.
Yeah. And I said this in my TikTok discussion yesterday, but you can always create content on one platform based on its formatting and culture, or however you want to define it, and then just download it and run it as an ad anywhere else. So if Facebook is great for driving people off the platform to your website or your merch store or whatever, you can use a TikTok video as a Facebook ad. So
and think of these things as tools too, not like, again, I'm going to use the word vortex, but not as something that you need to get sucked into and put all your creativity into it. Think of it as a marketing tool. This is a way that you're reaching people about something that you're doing in the real world.
Any final thoughts to wrap it up? Well, before we'll open up for questions if you have a question, but first I'll just say all of us work at CD Baby and would love to help you with your next release. Right now, any release is just $4.99 for like another week.
And then it's going to be $9.99.
Yeah, and that comes with everything, full monetization.
That means one time. We don't charge you to keep your music up every year. You only pay the one time, and your music is up there forever. So that's the big perk.
Yeah. So check out cdbaby.com if you're interested, and we'll be hanging around afterwards. But does anyone have any questions about releasing music, promoting music?
You're first. Do you want to speak into the mic? No. Okay.
Okay.
I actually released last month on CD Baby. I switched from DistroKid to CD Baby. I think I talked to you before because I'm Indie Weekly, so thank you. And then I have my second release starting in like 7 or 8 days, but I wanted to drop today. But then I went to the mechanical licensing thing, and I got the CD Baby Pro publishing thing, and they said they don't have me in there. So I wanted to find out if you guys can explain CD Baby, like your tiers, and when you hit that point where we don't have to do the work to go to make sure we're on mechanical licensing, whatever thingy.
The MLC?
But that thing.
Yeah.
When did you say that one was released?
January 17th.
It'll be there. Publishing money and that whole world moves at a glacier's pace. So, if you released today and your song exploded, it would still be 9 to 12 months before publishing revenues started rolling in. It will be very shortly. I mean, so they'll have it. Just follow up with our support team if you don't see it show up soon, and log into your account and check it out.
But the pro, if you go CD Baby Pro Publishing, that's when you guys.
Oh yeah, so if you didn't do CD Baby Pro, then we wouldn't have.
She's saying that she did.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
That's when you guys take care of that.
Yeah.
So you have the different levels.
Yeah. So
Probably be helpful.
yeah, standard distribution is it's everything that puts your music everywhere, monetizes. The only thing it doesn't do, we have our CD Baby Pro Publishing, which if you write and record original music, then we can act as your publishing administrator and collect all the additional publishing royalties for you. Which basically, every time you make, for example, like $5 on Spotify, there's an additional $1 of publishing revenue that we can get for you with mechanical royalties. So, and in the digital space, there's all sorts of interesting royalties that are being unlocked that didn't exist just a few years ago. Got a question?
Next. Oh, yeah. How do you keep your finger on the pulse?
If you're on whatever platform you're on, there are loads of people that are that companies and just popular users that are giving advice on how to use those platforms. So that's probably the best. If you want to pay for resources, like, we work at a company, so there's resources and things that I subscribe to for our team to know what's happening. But there's plenty of people on platform that for free telling you exactly how to do it on a daily basis.
Or listen to the DIY Musician podcast
or listen to
where we
the
do
DIY
it for
musician.
you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably super basic, but I just think follow people you like, and you probably like them because whatever they're doing on that platform speaks to you. So maybe that's enough for inspiration of how you can shape your content.
But there are some things like what I mentioned, how like Instagram, my Instagram feed I like to take nice, cool photos, and that's what it used to be. And I saw that reach just plummeting. It's like, that was kind of annoying because I liked doing that. But if you want reach on that platform, you had to do reels. And so those kind of things, when you follow some people, they'll point out like, no, they changed the algorithm. It's this now. And so those kind of tips about what format or some of the other things that are kind of the nuts and bolts of how platform work.
Camel
jacket.
jacket.
Talking about it.
Yes, you. We're ready for you. Yeah, you.
You mentioned playlist pitching platforms. I'm wondering which ones you've seen are most successful.
So you're asking about which are the most accessible or successful experiences with using playlist pitching platforms. Personally, for me, Groover, and
They're here.
And I should just be transparent. CD Baby does have a sort of partnership with them. We have a coupon code you can use to get 15% off. But before that was the case, I tested it out, and in contrast to another unnamed service that is similar, I had just so much better results with Groover. 40% of the playlists that I pitched my song to placed it, which, if you've ever pitched, is a pretty good success rate. So I would recommend them. And go to our YouTube channel if you want to find, I think it's just Groover CD Baby for the coupon code that gets you 15% off. How they work, just real quick, is you pay per curator that you pitch to. So it could be as affordable as I can only afford one, and it's $2 or whatever. I forget exactly the cost. Or if you're doing hundreds, either way, you get 15% off the total of your campaign.
The one thing I will highlight, and specifically related to our conversation, I've had so many artists say, I paid $50 on this playlist pitching service, which some of the ones are much, much more. Like Playlist Push, I think it might be $500 minimum for a campaign, up to several $1,000s. And artists oftentimes are expecting that financial, like they're like looking at it like they're buying into the stock market. I paid $1,000. I'm expecting $1,500 return on streaming revenue. That's not what your experience is going to be. What you're doing is you're paying for reach again. So that's if it's you're a new artist and it's like, I just need to get some traction going, get some momentum going. These are great tools to just get some tracks out there, to get some activity on your profile so it doesn't look like a ghost town if you're brand new. And they can also be great opportunities to unlock new fans. They can also be a great opportunity to get a lot of stream counts of people that will never listen to your music for real. So it's
which
one of those
can actually be damaging to how Spotify's algorithm functions, because if it's just a bunch of junk plays of people who might listen to your whole song but don't ever save it, they don't don't care. Basically, it's more passive listening. Essentially, what you're teaching, or you're confusing Spotify's algorithm about who your true fans are. So
yeah, I used one of the services one time, and it put one of my band's tracks in an 80s playlist. And it was like Bon Jovi, our song from this year, Def Leppard. And I'm like, that would be, I don't know. It's just, so all it is I got a bunch of plays from that by people who didn't want to hear that track because they wanted 80s music. And then it also tells the algorithm that, hey, the people that love their music, their new song, if people that love 80s music. And so that's where you need to be a little strategic and understand the pros and cons of what you're doing there.
Sorry. We'll do you, but then first you, yeah.
Can you guys let us in on any new stuff coming down the pipe? I saw that there's another company that was like pushing content to Vivo, and I thought that was really kind of a cool idea. It's like, well, how do you even get on Vivo? And then this company's doing that. You guys got anything like up your sleeve that you guys that you can talk about?
I don't know if it's anything we could talk about.
I
might
can be
have to-
really vague and say there's some cool metaversey type things that are in the pipeline for CD Baby, but
I don't even know if I know what you're talking about.
The answer is we're not allowed to say.
No, there's some big releases coming up this year that artists have been asking for a while from us. So be looking for that. That'll make it easier.
We're basically like Marvel, like can't talk about it.
Can't talk about it. But yeah, I mean, the thing that we like to do, like you mentioned, Vivo, that is only like a small segment of people that actually qualify for that. The tools and things that we like to make and release for artists is things that anyone can use and benefit from. So we've got some cool stuff coming up this year.
Yes.
So it sounds to me like with all of the options and all of the myriad ways that we could see ourselves as artists in those options, we need strategy.
Yes, strategy.
So building a strategy for a release, if it's an album or an EP or a single, I guess would take looking under the hood at a bunch of platforms that we may not know yet or are by definition always changing. So it seems like if there were some strategists, are there some good sources for strategy?
I mean, you're looking at three people that like to do this for a living. Strategy in particular.
We have a tool that's very helpful that helps build out a release plan. It's called our release plan generator that can help with start with the nuts and bolts of a solid release plan based on what you want to do. It's just cdbaby.com/release. It's a free tool.
or release.cdbaby.
It's really cool.
Is it release.cdbaby?
I think,
yeah.
Basically, you'll put your release date in, and it'll generate a timeline for you of the things that you need to do before your release date to really set yourself up for a solid release. All the way from make sure that stuff is mixed and mastered and your artwork is done before you start actually signing it up for distribution, to make sure you've pitched this through the Spotify editorial platform on your Spotify for Artists. Make sure that you've reached out to your fans by using this tool.
And it gives timelines. So if you said, I'm going to release this Friday, then a lot of the options are going to disappear because you don't have time for it. So it helps you understand time frames for if you want to be in the, most cities have like a local entertainment weekly little newspaper. If you want to pitch it to be reviewed there, you're going to need X amount of time because they need more than 2 weeks notice, Yeah,
I just had sort of a caveat. It's a great tool for sort of all the like infrastructural to-do list checkmark kind of thing to keep you organized in that way. What it doesn't do is maybe dig into your unique music and what you want, what platforms you prioritize to find your story and the hook. And it can't do that, obviously. So that's the hard part, but it's also the really, I think, exciting and creative and inspiring part. So...
And again, sort of what we're talking about up here is identifying what that goal is for that release. The best way to create a strategy is to know up front exactly what your goal is. If your goal is to make money, then this is an avenue you can take. If your goal is to reach a larger audience, then this is the avenue. Maybe your goal is just to sell out a show. How am I going to get there? So creating that goal up front and then knowing how to build out the release plan in advance and giving yourself enough time to get there is the best way.
Did I see that we have time for one more question?
Yes, we have time for
one more.
more.
One more. Oh,
I don't know.
I saw that hand
Do it
first.
again. Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
you raise your hand first.
You guys talked a little bit about focusing on where your audience is, whether that's on one platform or another. Can you guys talk a little bit about maybe transitioning, whether all of your audience is on Facebook and you're trying to get them over to Instagram or TikTok, or if you're a streamer and you're on Twitch or something and you're trying to get them over to Facebook, whether you guys think that's a good idea or maybe some strategies. Getting an audience on different platforms.
How to
well,
transition.
I think as an artist, I don't think you should be trying to get people to switch platforms because that's an uphill battle. They're going to use what they use. I think what you should be doing is looking how you can extract their information so you can have direct contact with them and let them know where you're making content and they can go find it. So to me, I think it's no matter what social platform your fans are on, especially if you're trying, like I'm in a situation where my band, I hate it that all our fans are on Facebook because it's so much more fun to create content on other platforms. But so I know that I have to have a strategy to keep some level of engagement there and trying to, keep getting that direct, that contact information, email or SMS, their phone number. But we don't spend a lot of time making content on Facebook. So it's like having that strategy of understanding, like now that I've got their content, I can let them know where we're at and they can come along for the ride. But I've got their email address, so that's what's most important.
I was going to say, I can see it sort of as like concentric circles. And if your list is at the heart of it, maybe your website is one step out, then Discord, and then Twitch, and then Facebook, Instagram, and then TikTok. I don't know if that's sort of an accurate portrayal, but the ways in which they get closer and closer to your own ownership, basically. So I could see sending someone from TikTok to Twitch, or Twitch to Discord, Discord to website, that sort of thing, or anyone to website, really. But I could see it being worth it as long as it's going towards the center of the circle, if that makes sense, but not the other way.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's about social platforms is they're very distinct communication styles, and so people tend to gravitate towards the communication style they like, or that they are used to, or that feels comfortable, or whatever. So that's why it's hard to I like that concentric circles. There's some that are more similar, and I'm like, oh, they're here, and I've been here, I'll jump on over there. But, if your fans are on Facebook, getting them to jump to TikTok is probably a stretch, because that's very different communication style, the kind of back and forth. And so that's where I'm like, I don't want to be in service of these platforms. I want my fans to come, I want to own that relationship. So that's always my focus.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we thank you all for joining
Thanks
us.
so much.
If you're now all have officially been on the DIY Musician podcast, your clapping will be in the background.
I think this will be episode 329.
Something
if you're
like
looking
that.
to hear your voice.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We'll be hanging out the rest of Folk Alliance, and we'd love to meet all of you.
Thank you.